Alright everyone, hello and welcome back to another tabs video. So today I want to focus on some balance issues. So with the new release of tabs, I feel like one particular faction still needs a little bit of love. That is the tribal faction. I don't know when I created a video, but it was, I don't know, probably around half a year ago at least, about Landfall fixing the tribal faction. First, if you want to see more tabs content, make sure to like and subscribe, and comment if you have balance ideas of your own. I also want to say that this is, of course, my own opinion. I'm not a game designer. I'm just a player. I've played, let's see how many. I've played 700 hours. Probably more than I should. I played a lot of tabs, so this is just my thoughts. I think the tribal faction needs a massive buff, to be quite honest with you. I think that they're really weak, and Landfall definitely needs to buff them. I think we should start with the Clubber first. Actually, I think the Clubber is in a not too bad of a state. Before full release or a couple updates ago, like Unit Creator-ish, the Clubber was one of the worst units ever, just efficiency-wise. It was 70 bucks, and the Farmer was also 70 bucks at that time. And unfortunately what would happen is that no one would buy the Clubber because the Farmer was so good. They've since increased the Farmer's price to make the Clubber more viable, I guess. But they still need to do more. Like, okay, these guys are going to be able to beat the Farmers most of the time in a one-on-one, right? We just pitted 14 against 14. And hey, you know, they're doing pretty good, which is awesome. I spent much less money on them than I did on the Farmers, which is insanely good. But they don't have a purpose anymore. I think this kind of goes for stuff like the Farmer and the Squire as well. Unless you're just like role-playing or doing a challenge or stuff, these guys do not even compare to these guys. One, there's no real reason for them. They don't do a ton of damage, even since they're buff. They're not really going to take out hero units. And you're really going to want to use range units against other fodder units, like the peasants or the farmers or the squires. And if you are going to use fodder, why not use the peasants? For one body is 30 bucks, right? Clubbers and peasants both take one arrow to kill, so it's not like clubbers have decently more health than any of the other fodder units. So there's really no point to them at this stage. I was gonna say at this point, but I'm like that would be a little bit redundant. So they definitely need a buff. Either, I don't think in price, if they want to do in price, maybe like around 50, also decrease the Farmer and the Squire. But I think what would really help is just increase their use. Tribal faction could be a super cool faction, but you're going to have to figure out how these guys are used. Whether they have like a minion rage ability like the Jarl, that would be really cool. Whether they did some support mechanic, whether they were stronger if they were in groups, or they were stronger if they were against some specific other faction, some mechanic that makes these guys viable, like for the Spooky faction, for example. I know Landfall's willing to do this because these guys have an awesome mechanic. While their shield is dreadful, and, you know, they do decent damage, for 80 bucks, you're like, what's the point of these guys? I could just get farmers, longer range, you know, better attacks and stuff. But look at this. Scare them away, which is incredibly helpful if you're low on money and you have to use your range units pretty cost effectively. So some mechanic that makes these guys viable, I think is going to be really important. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe a speed buff, or maybe you could control them in a group. I don't know. Maybe they could be buffed by the chieftain. Like specific faction buffs, I think would be really neat. Which brings me to my next point. The protectors are actually, they're decent. You're spending 50 or 20% less money than if you're going to go for a shield bearer. So I actually don't think that they're that bad in that regard. And I think actually these guys are good the way they are. Maybe even too good, although these guys don't need a nerf. The tribal faction is weak enough as it is. Spear throwers, I think, are actually in a good state as well, considering you're paying, again, 20 bucks less. For archers, they have slower range, but they do good damage, and they have a decent rate of fire. I think it's higher than archers, or at least it's higher than archers, so that's actually pretty good. I think they're also in a balanced state. I think the closer range makes it more viable, and also kind of, realistic too, as tabs can be. And the quick reload rate just gives them a nice buff. So I think they're definitely in a good spot. People who aren't in a good spot are the stoners. These guys are in such a bad spot. They're supposed to do like, I don't know what they're supposed to do. They have really bad range, very poor crowd control. Out of we put 7 stoners down, and they killed 7 guys, and oh no, 6 guys. And I put these guys in double line, so they'd have more of a chance to hit them. So yeah, these guys are really bad. Their range is just pitiful. If I put them farther back, it's worse than the spear thrower. So it's almost melee range, like not almost melee range. It's still far away, but they're pretty bad. And especially if you're going to be putting units in front of them, they're also not more stoners, please. They're also pretty sick in that regard, in that they're hitting their own units. Whether this does damage or not, I'm not sure, but it definitely puts off these guys' positioning. You saw like 3 landed on the ground there, which is definitely not ideal. So you're going to have to put these guys flanking around your infantry force, so like over here. And then you're going to see, look, these guys are separating off towards the storms. Now, luckily, they killed them because there's not that many squires, but you get the point I'm trying to make here. And I think the balance here is actually needs more help now than before, because now we have multiplier, so balance is actually semi-important. Well, it's definitely important. In a game, you want units to be balanced. Bone Mage, I'd say, are decent. Actually, I'd say these guys are pretty good. If the only thing that I wish that they weren't as bad with is they're definitely really good crowd control, but too good crowd control. You're killing a ton of your own units up here, which means that if you're going to want to use these guys effectively, then you're going to have to put like these guys so that they're not attracted, which kind of makes these guys really one use if you have any sort of infantry. And if the enemy has range, then these guys aren't going to be useful, because they're just going to be picked off if you don't put guys in front of them. But then you're killing your own guys when you use the Bone Mage. So in reality, are these guys really worth it? I don't think so. Unless the enemy is spamming range units up here, you're not really going to want to use them, which brings to mind that you could just use barrel rollers, or we used 3 Bone Mages there. They didn't even kill everyone. That was a bad example, because we only have 1 unit. We're killing almost everyone with 1 barrel roller for only 50 more. If these guys were even more compact, they would do more damage, as with the Bone Mages, so let's just stick with this for now. So I think they need a buff somehow. A nerf to friendly fire, maybe make them only do 50% damage to friendlies. Or maybe it takes longer for it to go out. Like, they fire back here, but all the way along to where the second Bone Mage is, no bones spread out. So maybe it gives them a little bit more viability if infantry is in front of them. I don't know, that's what I would do. Chieftain, these guys are in a terrible spot. These guys are so bad. I don't remember when the last time I actually want to use these guys. Like, are you serious? They do little damage. They take, how many arrows do they take? I think they take 2, or they take 1 arrow and then they die after the second one, right? Yes, they die after, oh wait, or was it the third one? Let's see here, sorry. My point still stands. Their health doesn't matter because they give no support and they do no damage, so there is no point to them. Okay, yeah, they 2 arrows to die. Please don't tell me they die in 1. I think they were originally supposed to be hero killers. Yeah, this does almost all of his health. By the time he's going to reach here, he can kill it, which is good. So at least they have decent move speed. My point still stands. I see no world in which you would pay $400 for this man. There's no point to these guys. They have no shield. They do not great damage. Their health is slightly above average. But that's about it. They can't do anything really. So I'd say a buff to their damage would be awesome. That way they could specialize in hero killing. Obviously, they're not going to be very good against clubbers because clubbers have like what, 50 health, and if these guys do like 100 damage, 150 damage, 200 damage, whatever, a lot of it's going to be wasted. Whereas they wouldn't be wasted if you're using kill heroes. like the Giant or the King or the Jarl or whatever, something like that. Maybe make them immune to Frozen, so they could take out the Frost Giant. That would be really cool. Or go down like a support route. They're the chieftain. Maybe they could give an attack bonus to the people in the tribal faction. That would be super cool and very unique. It would also give an indirect buff to the clubbers as well. So you kind of be solving two problems at once there, which I think would be I'd be over the moon for that. Because I really like the tribal faction. I think it has a lot of cool variability and different mechanics, but it's just in a bad state right now. Mammoths, I don't know. I think that these guys they're definitely decent. I'd say they're definitely decent, especially with a lot of weak units coming out from the good and the evil faction. Stuff like Shadow Walkers, Exiled Sentinel, Mad Mechanic, Void Cultist, and then for good you have these Devout Gauntlets, Celestial Aegis. Stuff like these are going to be super weak to these mammoths, which I actually think, this update kind of gave them a buff, to be fair. Although they didn't even kill that one. I think the worst thing is that they're massive hitbox, and they can really be easily targeted from far away. But I think they're in a decent state right now. So yeah, in conclusion, I think the tribal faction needs a buff, specifically to the clubber. Maybe give it some mechanic that makes it useful. Then we have the stoner, which needs to have either more range, more damage, more crowd control, or a buff in price to make it cheaper. But I still don't see myself using these guys, no matter really how cheap they are, unless it's under 100. Which I think you're kind of defeating your unit there if you make it that cheap. It kind of just screams, this guy's kind of worthless. Bone Mage, definitely decrease friendly fire some way, either by like buffing its range, but only the bones start growing at a specific point. Or just do like 50% damage to friendlies, something like that. And the Chieftain needs a buff to his damage, attack speed, health, maybe be a support unit to support like clubbers and such, which would be really fun. Something to make these guys better. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this video. Landfall, if you happen to see this video, I think these would be a great idea. Obviously, you probably have your own reasons why you don't want to buff these guys, but maybe if you didn't realize that they're really underpowered right now, you can take it into account. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and comment if you have other balance ideas that you want to put there, if you think I'm wrong, if you think I'm right, and if you have any challenges for multiplayer. Any of the games I play right now, which would be Tab G rounds and tabs. So yeah, I got your back, Landfall. Alright, see you guys later. Adios.